Corsair, Apple Floppy Days, Commodore, Tandy Floppy Days, Atari, TI Floppy Days. The weekend comes, the disk drive hums, ready to code for you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we played, you shared with me. Those days, Motorola, Intel 6502, graphics and text are there to view. Composite, color, or RGB, program fun for you and me.
Floppy Days is recorded in a live studio.
Inside PC Floppy Days, SD Amiga Floppy Days, Junior Sinclair Floppy Days, Classic Days, Microwaves, geeking all week with you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we play, you shared with me. Those days, these floppy days are yours and mine. These floppy days are yours and mine. Floppy days.
The TRS-80 Model 3.
Introducing the Apple IIc.
Atari 1040 ST. Commodore 64. What?
PC Junior, new from IBM.
Discover Atari.
At his Radio Shack Color Computer 3,
Introducing the Timex Sinclair 1000.
The first computer, this is the one. Texas Instruments home computer.
a wonder computer of the 1980s, the Commodore VIC-20.
Hello and welcome to episode 147 of the Floppy Days Podcast for January 2025. I'm Randy Kindig, your host for this podcast. This month is another interview from my backlog as I continue to get the opportunity for interviews with some amazing icons from the early personal computer days. This month, that person is Lorenzo Hagerty, who founded Dynasty Computer Corporation in 1979. Dynasty was the first network marketing company to exclusively carry the then new home computers with a repackaged Exidy Sorcerer. If you recall, this was a couple years before IBM brought out their first PC. I've had a few recent interviews with people involved with the Exidy Sorcerer, including Howell Ivy, Paul Terrell, and Vic Tolomei. However, this is the first one with someone from outside Exidy who purchased the Sorcerer in bulk and repackaged it for the general public. Please note that I do plan to get back into producing episodes covering specific vintage computers. Coming up in 2025 will be coverage of machines like the HP 97, the Lobo Max 80, the Dragon, and the Commodore 64. Research for those is underway, so expect those soon. Before we go on, let's not forget to mention some of the great storefronts that support our vintage computer hobby in a big way, such as 8bitclassics.com, run by my friend Corey Colts. It really is a great place to get vintage computer items like video cables, power supplies, cartridges, upgrades, and more for a wide variety of vintage computer platforms. I often talk about items I've gotten from Corey at 8-Bit Classics. Corey's been a friend of the show for some time, and I really appreciate his support of the podcast. Another one is arcadeshopper.com, run by my friend Greg McGill. Greg has a wide variety of hard-to-find items for a large number of platforms. This is another site that I do and have done a lot of shopping at, and I've mentioned numerous times on Floppy Days. If anything shows out of stock, just ping Greg through the contact form and he can check whether he has or can get more of the item for you. Future Vision Research is a more recent vendor managed by my friend Brian Cox. If you're in need of a FujiNet for any of the official platforms, the Apple II, Atari 8-Bit, Coco, Coleco Atom, Brian has what you need. He also has some cool soldering kits for whatever skill level you are at, including beginner, most of which I own and are or have put together. For all of these storefronts, when you place an order, please mention Floppy Days in the notes or the comments of the order. Doing so will directly help support the podcast. Many thanks. I also want to mention that several listeners appreciate the show enough to donate through patreon.com. Whether you give a one-time donation or donate on a monthly basis, I really appreciate you guys, and it helps offset the cost of running the podcast. I do have some tiers for paid members, and have come up with some ways to reward those who are generous enough to monetarily support the Floppy Days podcast on Patreon, such as early access to videos of interviews like the one being brought to you in audio form this episode. Visit patreon.com to see more details concerning the rewards for supporters. I just want to say it is my intention to always make all content available to everyone at no cost, while at the same time providing some benefits for those generous enough to support the podcast. Let me know your thoughts and enjoy the rest of the episode.
This is Lorenzo Hagerty, and you may know me as the host of the Psychedelic Salon podcast. But long before I began podcasting, I was the president of Dynasty Computer Corporation. Now, before IBM entered the PC business, we were one of the dozen or so companies that were helping to launch the industry. Those were exciting days, but I feared that the stories from back then had all faded away. Then I found the Floppy Days podcast. Wow, what a wonderful thing it is to be taken back to the beginning of the personal computer revolution. And there are hundreds of those stories preserved in these podcasts. So the next time you take that powerful little machine out of your pocket, connect it to the Floppy Days podcast and learn about the genesis of what is now your constant companion.
Okay, and now I'm going to talk about new acquisitions and what I've been up to. As I acquire vintage computers and all the accompanying paraphernalia, I continually look for ways to keep everything organized, as well as having it visible and or easily accessible. It occurred to me recently that I could easily and cheaply make more room to display computers and my books. On the book front, I have a bookshelf built into the entire wall of my office/museum. The shelves are adjustable and they can be moved up and down, which made me realize that there actually was room for another entire shelf across the entirety of the bookshelf if I moved one of the shelves down. So I've been working on getting some wood of the right length, thickness, and grain to make that additional shelf. Making a new shelf match the existing shelves is going to be a challenge, but I think we can get close with the right stain. As far as displaying more computers, I have a very long computer desk that has a bunch of empty space underneath. I typically have been storing computer boxes under there, but that can look messy and disorganized. I realized that I could get some 2 shelf units that would fit under the desk, allowing me to display additional computers. I purchased 4 of these 2 shelf units, and not only do I have room to display 6 or more additional computers, but I'm also able to use one of the units in a more hidden area to place current projects for easy access. Along with that, I purchased a new old desk that works better as a project table and looks a whole lot better than one of the folding tables I had been using for a project table. These are great changes to my vintage computer area that will allow even more enjoyment for myself and guests. Now on to new acquisitions. For about the 10th year in a row, I recently renewed my subscription to Juice.gs. If you don't currently have a subscription, I would highly recommend that you look at it. Juice.gs is a quarterly print magazine devoted to all models of Apple II computers. It has reviews, interviews, tutorials, etc., and is pretty useful for all Apple II users. I know I get a lot out of it. I look forward each quarter to getting my copy of the magazine, and am happy to support it. I also renewed my membership to another Apple II organization, Call Apple, which is billed as the world's largest Apple user group. There's a lot of benefits in joining the user group. There is a full-color Call Apple magazine, which usually has about 50 pages of photos, articles, reviews, and interviews. The show notes from the last several Floppy Days interviews have been published in the magazine. You also have access to all previous issues published all the way back to 1978. You can also get discounts on software by being a member of Call Apple. So there's a lot there, really, by being a member. You can't go wrong with either or both of these Apple-themed memberships, both JuiceGS and Call Apple. And if you have any interest in Apple II computers, check them out. Next up was a TRS-80 Model 1 keyboard remake. In the recent computer rescue from the home of David and Teresa Welsh that I talked about on episode 145, I had several TRS-80 Model 1s, monitors, and expansion interfaces to test. I ended up keeping a couple of additional Model 1s, which brought my total up to 4. However, in the process, I realized that all but one of my Model 1s had keyboard issues of some sort, which is not unusual for a Model 1. In most cases, just a few keys wouldn't work. However, I wanted my daily driver Model 1 to have a fully working keyboard. The only machine I had that didn't have keyboard issues is a Mint in-box machine that I don't really want to have out for daily use. While I was at Tandy Assembly, I saw a project by Marcel Urs at RetroStack where he built a fully assembled keyboard remake for the Model 1. So I went out and ordered an assembled keyboard, and with the help of some friends at our local club meeting, got it installed in my daily use Model 1 that has a switch to go between the Level 1 and Level 2 ROM. Now that machine has a great keyboard on it, and whenever I want to use the Model 1, it's a joy to use. Next up is a set of items that I bought from Jeff Burt. Jeff is really into the handheld and slab-top computers, like the Tandy Model 100-102, the Tandy Pocket computers, the TI-74 and TI-95 basic handhelds, and the TI-CC40, as well as many others. He has a bunch of items on his website for these types of machines. I recently mentioned on Floppy Days that I had gotten an NEC PC8201A slab-top computer from a local auction. Jeff sells a dial-a-ROM accessory for it. Now, recently I had purchased a dial-a-ROM for the Tandy Model 102, and I wanted one for the NEC as well. The dial-a-ROM, if you recall, provides a simple means to have multiple programs in ROM available on your computer. It comes preloaded with the most popular programs that are publicly available online and has a little switch on it that you can move to select which ROM you want to have available on your computer. Another item I picked up from Jeff is a TI-74 and TI-95 RAM/flash cart. Now both the TI-74 and the TI-95 have cartridge ports on them that can accommodate either a plug-in cartridge with preloaded applications in ROM, such as finance or statistics, or RAM cartridges that support 8 KB or 32 KB of constant battery memory. Unfortunately, neither the TI-74 or 95 were well supported by TI during their lifetimes. Thus, it's difficult to find a lot of the ROM cartridges, as well as the RAM cartridges. So Jeff offers 2 cartridges, providing 16 by 32K banked flash or 16 by 32K banked RAM memory. Each bank can be selected or switched to by using onboard dip switches. The RAM cartridge can function as either an 8K byte additional program memory or as a program storage area when used with the TI-74. Now the TI-95 will only use 16K bytes by default, but it does have the ability to use the full 32K of memory. And finally, another item I got from Jeff is a TI-CC40 RAM-ROM module. The TI-CC40 also has a cartridge port that can accommodate either a plug-in cartridge with preloaded applications in ROM or RAM cartridges that can have 8K bytes or 16K bytes of constant memory. Again, this device wasn't well supported by TI during its lifetime, making the ROM and RAM cartridges hard to obtain. Jeff has a memory cartridge that can function as either a RAM or ROM cartridge with the slide of a switch. When selected, the ROM section has 16 by 32K byte pages available. Each page can be selected by using the rotary hex switch. When the RAM is selected, this can function as either a 16K byte addition or as an overlay to the main RAM used by BASIC, or as a 16 by 32K byte pages that can be selected by the rotary hex switch. The 16 by 32K byte RAM pages, in conjunction with a machine code application, can be used to store program images from the main CC40 memory. The RAM section uses a 512K byte static RAM chip that has battery backup powered by a CR2032 button cell battery. So all of these items from Jeff are terrific, and I really appreciate the support for these small devices that he provides in his shop. And that's it for new acquisitions and what I've been up to this month.
Hi, this is Boise Pete, the author of Coco, The Colorful History of Tandy's Underdog Computer, and a general Coco enthusiast, and you're listening to the Floppy Days Podcast.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about upcoming shows. There are a ton of them in 2025, and more are being scheduled all the time. I think we've really seen an explosion in the number of vintage computer shows across the country. So that's great for everyone. There should be at least 1 or 2 in your area or somewhere reasonably close for you. I'm going to try to run through these fairly quickly because, again, there are a lot of them. So starting out in February, the first one really that is coming up this year as of this recording is Vintage Computer Festival Southern California, February 15th through the 17th at the Hotel Farah Event Center in Orange, California. This is the second such. I went to the inaugural one last year, really enjoyed it. Went to Disneyland while I was there, and just had a great time. Met a lot of people that I don't see here in the Midwest. April is extremely busy. There are several shows. First is the Midwest Gaming Classic, April 4th through the 6th at the Baird Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The same weekend is VCF East, again April 4th through the 6th, but this time in Wall, New Jersey. The following weekend is Indie Classic Computer and Video Game Expo, April 12th through the 13th at the Crown Plaza Airport Hotel in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm involved in this one, and we would love to have you come to, this is the 3rd iteration of the show. The Commodore Los Angeles Super Show is April 26th through the 27th at the Burbank VFW Hall in Burbank, California. Early May is the 32nd annual Last Chicago Cocoa Fest. That is at the Holiday Inn and Suites, Chicago Carroll Stream, Wheaton, in Carroll Stream, Illinois. May 3rd through the 4th is VCF Europe in Munich, Germany. In June, we've got several. There's Vancouver Retro Gaming Expo, June 14th. New Westminster, British Columbia, Canada. VCF Southwest, June 20th through the 22nd at the Davidson Gundy Alumni Center at the University of Texas, Dallas. Southern Fried Gaming Expo and VCF Southeast that same weekend. So Southwest and Southeast are the same weekend, June 20th through the 22nd. VCF Southeast is in Atlanta, Georgia. Also the same weekend is Pacific Commodore Expo Northwest version 4, June 21st through the 22nd at the Old Rainier Brewery Intraspace in Seattle, Washington. VCF Midwest is September 13th through the 14th at the Renaissance Schaumburg Convention Center, the new larger location, which was just fabulous last year, in Schaumburg, Illinois. Probably will be even larger this year if that's possible. Tandy Assembly, September 26th through the 28th at the Courtyard by Marriott, Springfield, Ohio. Portland Retro Gaming Expo, October 17th through the 19th at the Oregon Convention Center in Portland, Oregon. And Chicago TI International World Fair, October 25th at the Evanston Public Library in Evanston, Illinois. Note that I do have a page published on my Floppy Days website that has this schedule on it. So if you ever want to go there and get the links and see what's coming up, feel free to do that. And the link to that you can find in the show notes. And that's it for upcoming shows. Okay, and now for the Meet the Listeners segment. I am very pleased to say that this month I do have a segment sent in by a listener, Carlos. So I think he did a really good job with this, and I would like you to meet Carlos.
Hello, Randy. Hello, podcast listeners. My name's Carlos, and I'm a part-time podcaster myself and an avid, keen fan of the Floppy Days podcast. My first experience of computers, like many people here in the UK, was receiving a ZX Spectrum in the mid-80s. I got mine for Christmas 1986. It came with a little data cassette recorder, and I played Spy Hunter and all things like that, and dadded around with programming like everybody else. And then my next computer was a Commodore 64 with a disk drive. It was probably the computer I coveted that I saw at other people's houses before I got the Spectrum, so it was really nice to get one of them. And my favourite game for that was Way of the Exploding Fist. I was always awful at games when I was younger. I still am now, actually, as it goes. So I always enjoyed loading up the demos on the 5 1/4 inch floppies for the Commodore 64 and standing back in amazement and seeing how versatile the machine was. With the creative minds that were behind making these demos and making wonderful music as well, using the SID chip. Anyway, many years go past and those computers that we used to use turn into worthless junk and they all go into the big sort of skip in the sky or something. And then one day I was given an old PC. I couldn't really think of much to do with it, so all I could do was really put an emulator on it. So I was playing ZX Spectrum and Commodore games again, back to my heart's content. I've had many items in a retro collection. They've all come and gone in the past, but I've stuck with a small collection now. I've got my ZX Spectrums that I used to have when I was younger, rubber keyed ones, and also I've got a Harlequin, which is a replica Spectrum that I built from scratch, and I really enjoy playing that as well. I've got the Commodore 64 and the Atari. But the main things of interest in my collection are not that remarkable, but they're what I call slab top computers, and they're the Amstrad NC series and the Tandy NT series, which was the sort of like the OEM versions made by the Nakajima Corporation, which both manufacturers used for their own ends. So they're quite fascinating. I'll urge anyone to give them a look if they get a moment. Another favourite of mine are the Sign Organisers. The Sign Organiser 2 variety looks like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it'll probably last just as long. They're built like little tanks, but unfortunately they came out in the times when other technology just overtook them, so they became quite useless very quickly, which is a big pity. The favourite items that I collect now are magazines and books. I like engineering and computer manuals, and one of my particular favourites is getting a manual and looking in the margins and seeing annotations in pencil of the previous users. It gives me a connection back to the first users of the book, and it's something that I really enjoy reading through. And I find that connection really special. Anyway, that's me in a nutshell. Keep up the good work, Randy, and keep it blocky.
Okay, and now here's the interview with Lorenzo Hagerty in his time with Dynasty Computers. So I want to introduce a gentleman who has had an amazingly diverse career, including founding a computer company that was involved in selling computers in those very early home computer days, Mr. Lorenzo Hagerty. Hi, Lorenzo. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good, and anybody that might have known me back in the day, I was Larry Hagerty back there, but Burning Man changed me. I changed my name there, so I have become Lorenzo. But the old timers will remember Larry Hagerty.
Yeah, when I was doing research, I came across some references to Lawrence Hagerty, and then that's when I discovered, oh well, you must change your name at some point. So that's fine. So from looking at your history and your credentials on the internet, it's obvious that your career has really spanned a multitude of different industries. You've been an engineer, a lawyer, all sorts of things. You ran a computer company.
I was a stuntman in the movies too. Don't forget that.
Oh yeah. You mentioned that, a stuntman. Wow. That's certainly not similar to any of those other professions that I mentioned either.
I dropped out of law school to do that, and as a result, I lost my deferment, and I wound up in the Navy. But it was a good gig.
Of course, on this podcast, we want to focus on the vintage computer aspects of your career, but I do want to say I was absolutely amazed at the number of various professions that you've been engaged. It's just incredible.
Well, I had a headhunter one time said that she couldn't help me because I had no career pattern. I really haven't had a career. I've just had a series of adventures.
Well, on the other hand, it says you could do anything. So, at least that's what it tells me.
The personal computer company was my all-time favorite. That was my best gig. So it was a lot of fun. Great. Back in the early days, that's when it was really fun.
So let's start out by having you tell the audience where you live and what you do today.
Well, right now I'm living in Southern California in northern San Diego County, and I do podcasting. I'm a writer. I've published a number of books, and but basically I'm just a retired grandfather who does things to keep busy. And but I've always had this interest in computers, and my first one was a Sol 20 that I soldered together myself.
Oh wow, that's awesome! Yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah, it had this nice wooden sides on the case and everything. It was a beautiful machine. So. But back then, computers were like what to me at least what artificial intelligence is today. It was just something that was so important. I not only wanted to get one and use it for myself, but I thought everybody should have one. And so especially young people. And they were really expensive if back then. Even the TRS-80, of course, we called it the Trash 80 back then. But our company was in Dallas, and Trash 80 was being built just across the
right
nearby, and so there were a lot of computer stores in Dallas. And that was very early in the personal thing, because I used to keep the yellow pages of Dallas 2 years. 1 year there was no yellow page listing for computers at all, And then the following year they were listed, and we were one of the few we were listed as one of 2 or 3 computer companies in Dallas in that phone book. That was a big treasure for a while, but
I bet.
And then finally a computer store opened up, and I made friends with that guy, and he designed and built our follow-on computer that we never got funding for, and only built a few of them, and I doubt if there's any that exist anymore. But it was a really good machine for its day. It was right at the end of our run.
What gentleman was that?
I'm trying to remember his name. He had a computer store in Dallas, and his ex-wife was a really big-time journalist. She wrote about the PC industry, and somehow she got busted for getting stock for some of her reporting. But he designed and built this machine, and I think we only shipped probably a dozen or so before I went upside down. But it was a dual processor Z80A and one processor just for input and output. And he was one of the first people who was thinking about graphics and game design, stuff like that. And this was in the I guess the 70s, something like that. I can't remember the years anymore, but we made a friendship, and he got pretty far along with the original design. Tornado wiped out his workshop, and so, but all that time we were selling a rebranded Exidy, the Exidy Sorcerer, as you already know.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that more. But first of all, I guess I'm curious as to what led up to your creating or founding the Dynasty Computers company. What were the things that led up to actually creating that?
Well, I can tell the story now that there's a book called Salesforce Management that's used in grad school, business school, and there's about 15, 20 pages on Dynasty. And after the company had closed, I got a call from Southern Methodist Business School. They wanted me to come over and talk about Dynasty and that case study. And they asked the exact same question you just asked. And I lied to them. I didn't tell them the truth. But the truth is, there were no personal computers at the time that were powerful enough to run the program I had written to beat craps. I was going to go to Vegas and get rich beating craps. I had a betting routine, and none of the PCs were powerful enough. And so I went to him, and we started talking. And so I decided to get in the PC business and build a PC. He told me he could do this dual processor thing. But in the meantime, I started telling people about it. And we decided, a friend of mine and I, he's a lawyer, we decided the only way people could really afford these things is if they could write them off as a business expense. So we built a multi-level marketing strategy where, just like Amway and everything else, where you buy your inventory, well, you bought a demo machine, and then it was a tax write-off. And so we had to keep this, as a Ponzi scheme, actually, I guess, to get computers in people's hands that they could afford by, creating a little business. So we got other little things. At one time, I don't know if you remember this, but Reader's Digest had one of the first online systems called The Source. And it was a bulletin board system. And we sold, at one time I bought a block of 500 connections to The Source. And we were selling terminals so you could connect to The Source. And it was just it's like we're having an interactive discussion now, but it was all text-based. And I can't remember all the details, but it was one of the first online before AOL or any of those. So we kept doing those kind of things. And then we found the Sorcerer, I called it the Smart Alec 2 is what we called it. And that was just such a wonderful machine that if I hadn't found Exidy, we would have had about a 1-year lifespan. As a result, we had quite a few. In that article in Forbes magazine, they mentioned that we had 3,000 distributors in 17 states. That's basically how many computers we sold. and the people, we had other little things they would sell, so they could make it into a business. And I've always felt kind of guilty about that, because it was in a way not really straightforward. But I was speaking at one of the Java 1 conventions out in San Francisco. It was Java 2 or 3, something like that. And a guy came up to me and he looked awful familiar. And he says, "You don't remember me, do you?" I said, "No." And he says, "I used to work in your warehouse. I was a student, a high school student. And now I have a computer company with 50 people working for me. I got into computers working for you." So I had one success story I know of. And
I'm sure you had more than that, but
yeah, but I feel really good about that one.
Well, that's amazing. I have talked to a lot of people from Exidy. Did you know Howell Ivy, who was one of the principals at Exidy?
You know, I only went out there once, and that was so long ago. I'm 81 years old. I don't remember names too well anymore. And so I don't remember who I talked to. But I know they were kind of treating me really nice because I was putting some big orders in at the time. So I probably met some of the management people, but I don't know who.
Paul Terrell was another one who I've been talking with.
Yeah, I listened to your interview with him. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You probably met Paul, or you might have met Paul.
I'm sure I must have, because we were ordering like 100 at a time, something like that. So we were one of his customers that he would pay attention to, probably.
So the idea was that you would find these people that would basically be your distributors. They would buy the computer system from you, the whole package, write it off as a tax write-off. And then they would go out and try to sell these computers and or peripherals for them. And then those would be purchased through you. Is that true? Is that the way it worked?
No. They bought a system. They became a distributor. So they got it at a discount from the retail price.
Oh, okay.
And then they would show it off to their friends and family and relatives. And one or two of them would want to buy one, so they could make a little commission on somebody else buying one. It was just like an Amway thing or Mary Kay or whatever, a pyramid company it was. But I was a lawyer, so it was legitimate, and I actually became a member of the Direct Selling Association and went to I was on some of their committees. They're the ones that manage Amway and stuff like that. Public relations wise. So it was a legitimate legal thing, but in all honesty, I created it so people could get a tax write-off for their personal computers, because they were outrageously expensive. We had a rebranded Exidy Sorcerer that we put our own label on, a 12-inch monitor, black and white, a cassette tape recorder for input and output, and a couple pieces of software, basic and operating system, and it was selling for almost $29.95, almost $3,000, which is like $5,000 today for something with 48K of RAM.
Right.
So it was just outrageously expensive for what you were getting, but it was the only thing. Their personal computers were so new, nobody was getting much bang for the buck, compared to today.
Well, I mean, it wasn't cheap to buy like an Apple II system either, right? If you bought an Apple II system with a monitor and the drives and that sort of thing, they were all pretty expensive at the time. Yeah, I was looking at you sent over a list of some of the computers that you guys sold back in the day, and I found that fascinating that you had these. I mean, you called them Exidy Sorcerer compatible, but they basically were Exidy Sorcerers with your label on them, right? Is that what they were?
They were 100% compatible because they were Exidy Sorcerers.
They were sorcerers, okay.
And we had a label that called it the Smart ALEC, and ALEC was Automated Learning and Economics Center. And so we had some software to do that. But it was an Exidy Sorcerer, pure and simple.
Which were nice machines. I mean, those originally came out in 78. Yeah. So they were pretty early to the market with something that, right after the Apple II and the Commodore PET and the TRS-80 Model 1, they were like the next company that came out with something. And it was
they were really easy to use, and they hardly ever broke down. They were really an excellent machine, one of the best made in those times.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So I see you had like 3 different packages here that you offered. anywhere from $2,500 to $4,500. That was the retail price, right?
Yeah.
And then a lot of accessories, printers, like you said, the video displays, software.
I made one. I think I made entered the first 100 unit order for an MX80 dot matrix printers when.
Oh, really?
Okay. That and we were. It was just a club basically for all of us. I went out to the first Comdex, and the PC part of Comdex was in a hotel basement. And I remember seeing Bill Gates sitting there doing a demo, and somebody was talking about color on Apple, and he was just freaked out. He couldn't believe somebody had a color monitor already. So that was pretty early on in the times. We also sold this big machine. I can't remember what we called it, but it was a dual 8-inch drive machine, and I think you had like 100K per side, or
right,
something like that. They were really small, but we sold some of those for businesses. It was what happened is our people that would buy these machines, basically because they wanted a computer and learn about them. The more they'd learn about them, then they'd find uses for them, and they actually did go out and sell some. I mean, it wasn't just a total write-off, but I'd say probably 80% of our people bought the machines to get a discount. There we go. Yeah, that's the price list there.
Yeah, this is the price list that you sent me. It's fascinating to go through this. And I think this fourth page is the one where you're talking about that other system that was not.
Yeah, the auto manager. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that? I can increase that. Is that a little better?
Yeah. That's it. And whoever, I don't know whose system, where that came from. Somebody sent it to me, but I see the back thing is crossed off. So
right.
I guess we had dropped it, or they decided not to sell it.
Yeah.
This was my copy. This is one somebody sent to me, and I don't know where it came from, to tell you the truth.
So these were in 1982. This was a 1982 list.
Yes.
It's funny because I don't recall, and maybe I just am not recalling, when I talked with Howell Ivy and Paul Terrell both about Exidy, I don't remember them mentioning Dynasty Computer.
Well, it was a customer of theirs, and I don't know if they even knew that we were rebranding it, or they thought we were a computer store or what.
Oh, okay.
And,
I'll have to ask.
That actually is not the dual 8-inch machine. That's when Exidy came out with the 5 1/4-inch disk drive, and we had CPM.
Yeah.
That exactly. Wasn't a dual 8-inch machine. That one is on another price list that isn't here.
Okay.
Yeah, the Exidy had a lot of good software, and then we were selling these keyboard terminals that you could use to access the source, and those came with all kinds of arcade games that were ripoffs from Hong Kong, but I had Centipede and all those good games in black and white on our little terminal emulator. That's not on this list either. That came after this.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's pretty interesting to go through this list. I really appreciate you sending this to me. Is there anything else you can say about this? So I heard references in other places that you also sold something called the Smart Alex Junior, but I didn't see that on this list.
Yeah, that's the one I was referring to. That was it was more than a terminal emulator, because you could load software like some of these things like Hangman and those things, game programs. Those were things that went loaded into that little. It looked like a little keyboard, and it had an input device that it would hook up to a cassette recorder. Those programs were on cassette tapes, and you'd load it in. And anybody that used the cassette backup system in those days has had the experience of a CRC error. You would have to load in your software, and like the interpreter for BASIC, you could load that in, and it would take 10, 15 minutes to load in, and then your terminal would say CRC error. So you'd have to adjust the tone on your tape recorder, rewind it, and do it again. And sometimes take 2 or 3 tries to get the tone right to get it in. Yeah, that's a picture of it was taken. In fact, I'm holding it there in my.
You are right.
Yeah, that's the little thing. That's the Smart Alex Jr. And it hooked up to the TV. That's the article in Forbes. But you see, I'm also holding a phone. That was near the end of our run when I needed some money, and a venture capital company that was selling Nokia phones came in, and basically they took the company over to get the sales force, and left me with everything else, and I left. It was all over, but it kept us alive for a little while selling phones. And this is when the AT&T thing came in that allowed you to plug in your own cell phone, your own phone to a landline. It used to be against the law to hook up anything to a telephone line. And then that decision came out, and all these phones flooded the market, and we had all kinds of phones that we sold for a while. But anyhow, it was heady times. Nobody knew where we were going or what was going to happen next. And it was we were manufacturing some of the hardware that we were selling. And I know I could call up a friend I had over at Osborne Computer and say, "Hey, I'm short on these chips. Can you loan me some, and I'll send you some back?" And that was how a lot of things worked back then. Is we didn't feel like we were competing with one another as much as building something together, even though different companies. So it was a good time, actually.
It wasn't Lee Felsenstein, was it? That you knew at Osborne?
I didn't know him, but I knew a guy in shipping.
Okay.
Or inventory. So one of their inventory managers, and we'd swap chips back and forth, loan each other chips and stuff like that.
Nice. Okay.
I had Osborne as well. One of the original luggables. They I don't know.
You owned one, you mean?
Yeah. We bought one. The company owned one. Yeah, and those things weighed about 30 pounds. I think that's why we call them luggables. But
yeah, I've got one. It's heavy. Yeah, it's very heavy.
But as another interesting computer is now you've got one in your pocket. But Osborne was the first portable.
Yeah. So when you founded the company, did anyone found that with you, or who were your principals, or anyone that we?
It was just me.
Know?
Just me.
You?
Yeah,
Okay.
I started it in my bedroom, and I think I had a few $1,000. Bought some inventory. I went to Comdex. I was just really didn't know what in the hell I was doing, to tell you the truth. I had no idea. And that's when I went over to Southern Methodist afterwards in that grad school class. They started asking me, "Well, what did you do? What market research did you do?" And I said, I like computers. They looked like a lot of fun. I built one. That was it. And so I was really no help to the people in grad school. But the reason that I think that we did so good is just it was new. It's just like AI right now. That you get in first and you get going. My podcast is the same way. I started the podcast in March of 2005, when podcasting wasn't even 6 months old, and I called it the Psychedelic Salon. For over a year, it was the only podcast with the word psychedelic in it, and that's how my podcast became big. Yes, people, and then the Psychedelic Furs came online too. I'm talking about iTunes here, and it just became really big overnight because nobody else was using the word. And I was afraid to use it at first. I was afraid I'd get arrested or something like that because you couldn't use that word back then. But so with computers, it was the same thing. We were just there early. That's all.
So you sold Z80 CPM machines, right? The Sorcerer.
Right. Yeah.
Did you actually license CPM then from Gary Kildall, or how did you?
Yeah. I had a license for CPM, and I forgot how many you had to buy at a time, something like that. And actually, when I closed Dynasty, I really was able to pay off all of our debts except for one that I didn't feel was fair. At the time, I had a license for Microsoft, before Windows, the old Microsoft operating system. And I hadn't issued most of the licenses. And, about a year after Dynasty closed, I get this nasty letter from a Microsoft lawyer saying they're going to sue me for $25,000 for these licenses. And, I hadn't even issued them. And so I got a hold of my lawyer, who he was a close friend. And he wrote back to him and he said, "I've been searching for that bastard myself. If you find him, let me know. He owes me even more money than he owes you." And that was the end of it from Microsoft. So I got out of the computer business only owing one person, Bill Gates.
Did you get an opportunity while you were involved with Dynasty in meeting any other computer icon, or I guess you'd call them, computer icons, people who were well known, or at least today are well known as having been involved back in the day?
Not really. And I think the reason is because of our marketing system. Everybody said, "Well, you're a pyramid company selling computers." We were sort of the bad guys, I guess. We didn't seem kosher enough for them. But no, I even when I went to the Comdexes and stuff, I got to know a couple people in the mini computer business, but nobody whose name I even really remember anymore. So nothing compared to what you have in your podcast.
So what do you remember about the late 70s and early 80s in terms of running a computer company? You already mentioned that you felt like a camaraderie, I guess, with other computer companies, but anything else you can recall about those particular times being involved with computers?
Well, everybody that I was involved with and came into contact with really had an inkling that it was going to be much bigger than most people realized. We didn't foresee what we're doing right now with live video. I just did a live podcast. I do 2 live salons a week. And yesterday we had somebody from Australia, somebody else from Bali. We always have people from England, and so all around the world we had one guy call in, a Russian kid was flying from Armenia to Spain, and he was in the air podcasting or Zooming with us live in the air. Yeah. And when you think about the technology involved there, we were selling machines that came with basically 16K of RAM. You can pay extra to get 48K was the biggest you could get. Look where we are now, and this isn't that many years later. And with what's happening now with artificial intelligence, with GPT-4, et cetera, and stability, it's, I don't think there's any way any of us can imagine 5 years from now, technology-wise.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's
coding is going away. I just read another article today where GPT-4 has gotten so good at coding, and they've got other AIs that are even better. Coding is going to become, obsolete as far as humans doing it. You'll be directing the code, but the actual writing of the code is being done by AI now, a significant amount of it already.
Mm-hmm.
So we were like the people in AI are today that are just saying, you don't know what's going to happen. It's incredible. We were like, I remember a guy asked me, he says, "Well, that machine, it's a recipe book. Why do I want it?" And I said, "I don't know. I can't give you a good reason to do it. But if you don't get one, your children are going to be left behind."
That's true. That's true.
I don't think I was being dishonest about that.
No.
And everybody felt that way. We really felt like we were on a mission. It was evangelical almost, the way we believed in computing, getting it out of the glass wall, taking down that glass barrier. And many of us had taken courses, and I always did some computing in college. I got out in '64, so it was pretty dull then. But we would go over and type our own punch cards, and then we'd have to hand them into a through a glass window and all. So it was really exciting to break this control of the big iron.
I'm familiar with the punch cards, even though I went to college 11 years later than you did. I still had to do punch cards for a little bit because it was hard to get on the terminals, right? There were people on the terminals, but it's easy to get to a punch card machine. So
here's something most people don't know about punch cards. One of my college roommates got married the day after graduation, and so we went over to the computer center and got all the little things that were punched out. The little graffiti, confetti. And we not only threw it, but we put it in his luggage. To this day, they haven't gotten them all out of their luggage.
I'll bet not. Oh, wow. So as far when Dynasty was at its peak, how many employees did it have and how many different locations?
Well, we only had one physical location, and that was in North Dallas. And we had in shipping, and most of our people were in shipping. At one time, I guess we never got over 50 people. We were probably in the 35 to 50 area most of the time. And a big part of that was in shipping, and because we would get the machines, the Exidy machines in, and then we had to, put our labels on them and burn them in and test them and configure the whole system so it'd come out as a package and they just plug and play. And we had a lot of people doing that, but it was never a big giant company as far as what you have today.
Did you have a good margin on those when you sold those?
It was, well, actually, we as a company had a pretty good margin on them, a lot better margin than our distributors had. But I couldn't recall any of that right now. My ex-wife was our accountant, and we're still really close friends. We Zoom with our kids and grandkids every month. So I could ask her, but she probably wouldn't remember either. It was enough to keep us in business for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And we kept growing. That was the problem. We were selling too much stuff. Cash flow was a problem. And I was an electrical engineer and a lawyer. I had no idea about running a business. And so I'd borrow from the bank, and I had a good relationship with a banker. I just call him up and I say, I need another $10,000. And cash flow was a real problem when you don't know how to run a business. And all I knew is I wanted to get computers into a lot of people's hands, and I was really excited about it. And I think my excitement is what carried the thing through for several years. And then IBM came in, and their advertising budget for a month was like our annual sales. So they just crushed us like a bug. And we kept saying, and their machines were inferior to everything out there. Although I remember I finally bought an IBM after Dynasty closed, and I bought one with a 10 megabyte hard drive.
Yeah.
And I got mocked mercilessly because what are you going to do? You're never going to fill that thing up.
That's crazy, isn't it?
You probably heard the similar things.
Yeah. I mean, and today photos are 10 megabytes. One single photo. It's crazy.
I think it's important what you're doing, so that there will be some people that can judge how far and how fast this industry has come. I don't think there's any comparable of any industry in human history, that has done anything like the personal computer industry. It has changed the world.
It has. And you think about how more powerful, the phone you have in your pocket is light years more powerful than what we had sitting on a desk in 1980. And they're millions of times faster and millions of times more storage, and it's crazy. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in the future, but I know 40 years from now, I can't even imagine what it's going to be like.
I can remember growing up just outside of Chicago, and the Sunday Funnies, one of my favorite one, was the Dick Tracy story. And Dick Tracy had a 2-way wrist radio. My biggest dream as a young boy was to have a 2-way wrist radio.
Yeah.
And now in your pocket, the computer you have is more powerful than the first moonlander had on board. So
Yeah, oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, way more powerful.
yeah.
And I've got the Dick Tracy device here with my Apple Watch. Sometimes I feel like Dick Tracy. My wife calls me and I answer on my watch. It's like this is nuts.
Yeah, you look a little bit like Dick Tracy too, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So Dynasty Computers closed its doors in 1983, I think you said, right?
That sounds about right. I really, all those years, so many of them now have kind of blended together, but it's around 83, something like that, I think. Yeah. It was short. The PC, IBM PC came out, and I think it came out in 82.
It came out in 81. Yeah.
81. Okay. So yeah, it's probably 83 would be about right. We didn't survive too much longer after that.
So the competition from the IBM PCs was the biggest reason that Dynasty closed its doors.
Yeah. People would say, well, yeah, you've got a better machine and all like that, but it's IBM. Nobody ever gets fired for buying IBM. That was the thing. And I've worked for IBM actually as a contract writer at one time. So
oh, did you?
So I've been an IBM guy too.
I noticed when I was doing some research, you mentioned somewhere on one of your blogs that you worked for a company called Success Inc. Or maybe was that your company or was that someone else's company?
Mine and a partner. It was a motivational company,
okay.
and we actually Dynasty evolved into that because I had all these distributors, so I made some, sold them and like that. So yeah, it was just another company.
Well, I noticed that it was mentioned that you covered introduction to personal computers there, so that's why I was wondering.
Yeah, actually, I did a cassette tape series about introduction to personal computers, and actually a copy is in the DigiBarn, Bruce's DigiBarn. But I've got this recording on cassette tapes, and it's really interesting to me, at least. I talk about the day will come when you'll be able to exercise using your computer, and you'll be in a room and it'll be shooting just like you'll be shooting things coming in at the moon, like I was describing some game. And now there are exercise games that in virtual worlds, and I've got 2 or 3 photographs of me giving that talk and walking across the room in the machine. So once the text to video gets better, I intend to recreate that whole thing by entering the text from the talk, or using the talk, and animate the rest of it using those few pictures I have and just expand them, because the AI tape videos are that good already. So eventually I'm going to have that done in a video format sometime in the next couple of years, I think. But yeah, it was I probably sold thousands of copies of those things, because that was when personal computer was really just getting started.
Oh, that would be interesting to listen to. So I could find these somewhere, maybe on eBay or Amazon or somewhere.
Go to the DigiBarn. He might even have them online, digibarn.com.
Okay.
And if not, if you're interested, I've got a copy out in the garage. I could probably send. I might even digitize it. I don't know, but eventually I can get you a copy somehow if you're following up on that.
Yeah, cool. I definitely would like to follow up on that and make sure that it's archived somewhere. Maybe the DigiBarn's already done that, but you also wrote some books, and I guess I was curious. I haven't read or haven't purchased any of those books yet, but do any of them talk about your time at Dynasty?
First of all, you can get all of my books for free in PDF format. I put them all online. Just go to lorenzohagerty.com.
Okay.
And there's free books there. I have 2 books of chronicles where the Chronicles #1 probably has something in it. They're just little vignettes, little 1-page things. and there's a couple hundred of those. There must be some Dynasty stuff in that, but I don't remember for sure now. None of them were specifically about Dynasty or computer. Oh, yeah, there were a couple things about Dynasty in the Chronicles volume 1 of the Chronicles, and so you can get that online for free in PDF. And there's an index in the back of it, so you can find out real quickly. You wouldn't have to read it.
Yeah, I'll look for that. That's great. So, did you have any other computer involvement after Dynasty? I know, again, you had a pretty varied career, but
well, I became I fell on hard times, so I became a tech writer, and I did a lot of tech writing, but then eventually I wound up working at Verizon, and I became their internet evangelist. And that was really fun because I got to work with BBN, Bolt, Brannicky, and Newman. They were running a third of the backbone at the time, and going out to their offices in Cambridge, and I would get information from them. And then my job was internet evangelist, and so I'd travel around Europe and the United States talking about how great the internet was. But one of the most memorable things I remember, I can't remember the guy's name now, the guy that came up with the @ sign for email, worked at BBN, and he was telling me one night, he says, you come over here and watch the backbone on weekdays, and he says, the traffic's just flowing through it, but come 3 o'clock Eastern time, you watch, it's like a boa constrictor swallowing a pig. All of a sudden there's this big spike, and it goes till about 5 o'clock, but that keeps moving westward. And what it was young boys coming home from school, downloading porn, watching porn, and you can see the spike in internet usage back then, just until their parents got home.
Right. Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, all of the computing I did after that was data centers and trying to sell the internet to middle managers, stuff like that.
Okay.
But it's exciting. I got to meet a lot of those people who, were actually doing some of the big moving and shaking stuff. But
yeah.
And they were all nice to me because we were also a customer. At one point in time, I hadn't realized that Microsoft was one of the biggest customers, GTE at the time. And I was a spokesman. They'd come to me whenever they wanted, different trade magazines. And so somebody asked, I forgot what the question was about Microsoft. And I said, oh, Microsoft, that's the biggest virus out there. And the Microsoft operating system, I called it the biggest virus out there. And I got a call from an executive vice president I didn't even know existed at the top of the company. He says, I was never to mention Microsoft in a conversation ever again, or I would be fired immediately, because they were our biggest customer in the phone business at the time.
Yeah.
Listening phone business. So anyhow, but my computer, I've always just been attracted to them and like that. But as far as a business, it takes a lot of venture capital and a lot of big money and connections and stuff I didn't have. So I just never even attempted a business again. And I didn't know what I was doing in business. So I want to be really honest. I was lucky to be there early and had some success, but it was just because I was an early adopter.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the right time. Definitely. Mm-hmm. Sounds like you got lucky there. And it sounds like you had a passion for it at the time. So that I'm sure helps sustain you as well.
Yeah, and I have an equal passion now for artificial intelligence. I've been publishing this never-ending story I've written. I've done 140 chapters already, and it's jointly authored by me and GPT-4. And I release it in 4-chapter installments, and they go directly into the public domain. So I've been doing it on my Patreon, and now I'm 3 months after I put it on Patreon, it shows up on Substack. So my plan is to, because it's about artificial intelligence and it's a coming of age novel, a young adult novel. So what I want to do is influence, teenagers to think about white hat hacking and really getting into writing code and not trusting AI for everything. You know, AI is going to be hacked a lot, especially people's schedules, things like that. And so anyhow, it's an involvement in, I guess, computing in a way, but I've gotten to I can use it really well. I have gotten to be a real expert at prompts for this one little narrow thing, if you want to write a sci-fi book, because what you can become with it, and it's like becoming one with your code. You know, it's not a person, it's code. And I recognize it as code really being good code, and just using it, I get a thrill about, wow, I can't believe they got it to do this and this. And so in a sense, I feel like I'm still deeply involved in computers, but in computing itself, not computers per se.
The AI stuff is actually becoming big, even in the vintage computer community, because the idea is that these AI bots can even write code for some of these old computers, you know, if you train them well enough to do that. So, you know, it's
here's something interesting about the old computer community. Bruce Damer, who owns the DigiBarn Computer Museum, he actually had manuals for all of these. He had in the museum, he has almost every PC ever built and has their manuals. Well, turns out there's a lot of lawsuits about code and manuals, and lawyers will rent these manuals from him for the course of a lawsuit or something like that. And he makes a lot of money renting out old computer manuals. They're hard. And if you have old computer manuals, you advertise in the legal community, and you have a nice little side gig going there.
Well, that's interesting. I've got a whole library full of old computer manuals. So.
You ought to approach some lawyers that are into copyright issues and legal issues around computers, because you can. What happened is he was loaning them out to him for a flat fee, and then he was never getting them back. So instead, he started renting them by the week or the month or something like that, and so he gets them all back now.
Then he gets them back. That makes sense.
A little advice to you: if you're going to get into that little side hustle, just rent them. Don't. So that they have a check coming in every month, and they say, "Okay, we'll send this thing back."
Yeah, that's a nice incentive for them to send it back. That's cool. So I'm really curious, Lorenzo, on what are vintage computers today, at least, which ones you owned, and do you still have any?
Well, the second one's easy to answer. No, I don't have any. Don't even have any of my own. I had an Apple I and an Apple II, or the company had. I don't know what happened to those.
I was going to say that's incredible, because you know the Apple ones were extremely rare, and if you had one today, it'd be worth a lot of money.
Yeah, the guy actually, we didn't actually own it. It was Bill Fritz lent it to us, and I think he finally got it back. But we had it there for a couple of years. We'd show it off. The one I wish I still had was my Sol 20. I soldered it together myself, you know, and actually after Dynasty folded, that little Sol 20 was still being used by a company to, you know, check their inventory or marketing. I don't know.
Really?
I'd written a program for them to check their orders coming in. They had complex order system, and they were still using that when Dynasty folded. So, but that was a neat little box. Actually, of all the computers I've had, the best one I've ever had was the Exidy Sorcerer. That's the one I wish I had yet. You know, that we had a good one that we made with dual processors, but there are only a few of those made, and they're long gone somewhere. But yeah, I had an Osborne luggable. Had I'll say a TRS 80, since you had one. I won't call it a trash 80.
It's all right. It's all right. People still do that today. So,
and what else did I have? Those were the main ones. The TRS-80, and then the Apple. We got an Apple II just because that was really the leading edge of computing at the time.
Yeah.
And so we just wanted to know what was going on.
Never had a Commodore PET?
No, I never did. Oh, I had an Amiga.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, that was after Dynasty, but I had an Amiga for a while when I was living in Tampa. That really was maybe the pinnacle of those early day computers, because it was an amazing machine. So
yeah, those were. Do you remember which model it was? 1000 or the 500? Was it the PC style, or was it everything built into a keyboard style?
It was all built into a keyboard, and we used it at I did a lot of video at a public access place, and we used it for our public access video. It was about the best thing you could get for video at the time.
Yeah, probably an Amiga 500 then, it sounds like.
Might have been. I couldn't tell you the model number until you and I were talking today. I was having trouble remember some of my own products names. So
yeah. Well, you know what? I think I pretty much run out of questions. Are there any other questions I should have asked that I didn't?
Probably not. That we were just a minor blip in the whole thing, but it was more of a peek into the minds of people who didn't know what a computer was but wanted to learn. People were really curious about it, and they had to get over that fear that they're going to break the machine. That was the biggest fear people had, is from the keyboard. Will I catch it on fire? Will I burn? That people didn't have exposure to these things. So it was a good experience. I don't regret doing it. Knowing what I know today, even back in those days, if I'd known something about business, we might still even be here. But to me, it was a fun hobby that lasted several years, and I didn't have to go to a regular job.
Right. And there's a lot to be said for that.
Oh yeah.
So is there anything you want to leave with the listeners or say to the listeners before we sign off here?
Just keep listening, because there's a lot of information that was lost by some of these people, some of them dying too soon and all. But if you really want to get a handle on starting a new business today, listen to some of the stories of how the old ones failed and what they did wrong. Because the potential for getting involved in computer-aided something or other today just dwarfs whatever has been before. That if I was 15 years old today, I would be going crazy. I'd be skipping school and digging into what's going on with AI. I think that just don't lose your curiosity, but also don't forget that it's built on something. Today is built on something that a lot of people added to, and you can do the same thing today in AI if you're 15 years old. So don't let anybody tell you no. Just figure another way to do it.
Perfect. All right, appreciate that. All right, well, that's really all I had. I really appreciate your time, Lorenzo.
Been a lot of fun.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. I'll talk to you later.
Right. See you.
Well.
Okay, and that's it for the episode for this month. I want to give out special thanks to Lorenzo for his time and willingness to be interviewed for the show. And I also want to thank Carlos, host of the Bite High No Limit podcast, for his contribution to the Meet the Listener segment. I provided links in the show notes for all the great websites we discussed during the podcast. Just go to floppydays.com for the full list. Please provide feedback, and there are many ways that you can do that, at Apple Podcasts or on the website, via email at floppydays@gmail.com, via Twitter at floppydays, on Blue Sky at floppydays.bsky.social, on Mastodon at floppydays@oldbytes.space, on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/floppydays, or on the Discord server, whose link is at floppydays.com. Besides the website and Apple Podcasts, Floppy Days can also be streamed from TuneIn, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. Until the next show, pull out a vintage computer and compute as if it were yesterday. Bye!